In this, the very first of our That's My Vinyl Answer podcasts, I was lucky enough to be able to travel down to Somerset to the home recording studio of Bruce Soord, the lead singer of the Pineapple Thief. I talked to Bruce extensively about not just the band's career, but his career as a solo artist and the ongoing plans for new music. We then asked Bruce to answer the set questions and to tell us what his vinyl answer is.
So hi, my name's Anthony and I'm with Make a Difference with Records. I'm lucky enough today to be here with Bruce Soord from the Pineapple Thief. Bruce, thank you for inviting me down here.
Absolute pleasure. Yeah.
Good to see you. So Bruce, I say 25 years in the business, 23 years in the business nearly.
Yeah.
Still looking good in it though, I have to say.
Thank you very much.
Crazy schedule if you look at both the touring you've done and then the volume of output, so 14 albums in the Pineapple Thief, I think, over studio albums.
Yeah, do you know, I haven't counted.
14 albums.
14.
I have counted.
Right.
Did a bit of research, so
Yeah,
14
that's
studio
good.
albums, 2 solo albums,
Yeah.
and then of course the collaboration with Jonas, which we'll talk about a bit later. Where does the drive and where does that energy come from?
I don't know. I really don't know. And I remember in the early days, and certainly even before the Pineapple Thief started, so I was always doing music, and I was in bands that were playing around my town in Yeovil.
Yeah.
And when I met my wife, that was back in 1997, I think.
So
it was
2 years before
the Pineapple Thief,
Yeah.
And I was in a band called Vulgar Unicorn back then, but I wasn't really the main guy.
Vulgar Unicorn.
Yeah.
Where did that come
Oh,
from?
that's a different. That's another story. You might find some albums out there, but they'd be a rarity. But we did have a small deal back then with a label called Cyclops. But so it was always, ever since I met my wife, it was always an obsession. And I remember saying something really pretentious to her when we first met. I said, "Oh, you do realise that music is my passion, and I'm always, that kind of thing."
That was your chat up.
Yeah, it's like, but yeah, and for some reason, it's just always been something that I just wanted to do all the time. And I remember in the early days when we were young and all my friends were going out on Friday nights, Saturday nights, getting out on the town, getting drunk. I'd rather be at home in my, making music, whether it's strumming my guitar, trying to write a song, and then getting a little studio, cobbling a studio together, and that was it. And it's never really changed.
You were self-taught, I believe, is that right?
I was, yes. So technically, when we're touring with these really great guitar players who we've had, they always look at me and go, "Bruce, you really should, work on your technique and learn these, because I don't know." They'll be quoting scales at me and all this kind of. I said, "Well, I didn't know it was that scale. I just do what I hear." I think as a songwriter, that's the thing, because I picked up a guitar as a tool to write songs. I didn't pick up a guitar because I wanted to be Eddie Van Halen or anything like that. But although it would be nice, I wouldn't say no to being able to do that kind of thing. But it was never my drive. I just wanted to write songs. That's all I ever wanted to do.
And was it a guitar because guitars were cool, or was it just a practical thing you could carry it around and
I remember,
a grand piano wouldn't fit in your bedroom, I guess?
No, I remember when I was at school, so this must have been 86, 7.
Yeah.
My mates were getting a band together and they could already play. So one of my mates called Richard Hunt, he was a grade 8 violinist and grade 6 pianist at the time, which was amazing. I looked at him and thought, wow, and I remember walking back from school with him and I said, "Oh, maybe I should learn an instrument." And I knew there wasn't a guitarist in this group. And I said, "It's too late, isn't it? I'm just too old." I was like 14.
Too old. Oh, lovely.
And but that's how it felt, because all my friends could already play. And he said, "It was never too late. It's never too late, Bruce." And so I did. I just saved up some money and bought a really cheap nylon string guitar, and that was that. That's how the guitar became my thing.
And the self-taught books, or?
Yeah, I had a book, Burt Weedon, Playing a Day.
So copies of Burt Weedon were selling well in those days. Yeah. Of course, these days you've got it all online and YouTube.
Oh,
and
it's incredible! It's incredible.
Jesus.
One of our touring guitarists, George Marios, he's an online tutor, and not only just puts videos on YouTube, but if you're having a lesson, it's just done through your phone, through your whatever. It's just technology just allows that now.
So if you think about the kind of obviously the transition and the change over many years, starting off with a guitar in your bedroom, and we're now sitting here in a purpose-built
Yeah,
studio. When did this happen?
Gradually, I'd say. So in the early days, so Pineapple Thief started in 1999, and that was when technology was, you'd had to be a bit of a geek, really. So you had to,
Okay.
so I built my computers, and you had to wire connect. The way you connected audio together was difficult, and you had to have purpose-built hardware. Not like today where everything's just done inside a computer.
Yeah.
So it was expensive, and I remember just loading up all my credit cards and just thinking, I've got to do it now. I've got to have the gear now, otherwise I can't make music. And I mean, and it's funny actually because right now I'm just finishing a box set of the early years. So I've gone back to all these records and opening up these old sessions, which was a challenge in itself because the technology is just and the software is it's long defunct. So I've gone back and opening these sessions, and I can hear myself in between tracks. I can hear my old cats meowing in the background, and just remembered what it was like in 1999. Just really, relatively, obviously 23 years later, I'm a lot wiser and know a lot more about the music business and how to do it. So when you go back, you're like, oh blimey, you know how naive I was. But, it was still so exciting, and I was able to mix and release records. Even, they didn't sound, I would say they didn't sound that great, but they were passable. People, obviously they did because, the Pineapple Thief kind of grew and grew and grew. So yeah, it was, I have really fond memories of it. And
So what are you doing with those early releases? Are you remixing them in 5.1?
Yeah, so I've remixed all the stereo mixes because I went back and you open the mixes and you think, oh my god, what are you doing? You just listen to it and straight away you think, right, this needs to be remixed. It's just a case of sculpting the sound so it just everything sits in its place. Yeah. In the early days, it was just let's just push everything up, and it's
the equalizer button. Yeah. Do you remember the old equalizers?
Exactly.
With all the
boost, whatever boost you can push, on everything.
Yeah.
And then you wonder why it didn't sound as good as the records of the the big releases of the time. And so now I know. Yeah. So I can go back and fix all that. So yeah, we're doing the first. Well, it's complicated because I did all these extra out, these bonus things. So a couple of the albums came out with these 8 days and 8 days later bonus albums, which is just a record I did and wrote and recorded in 8 days. Stupid idea, but that was because my record label at the time said, Bruce, we've got the CD manufacturer made a mistake and they've offered me 1,000 free CDs. Have you got some stuff that's not been released? I said, no, I haven't got anything. Tell you what, I'll just write an
next
album.
Tuesday, it'll be on your desk.
Yeah. So I did this, and I was working at the time. So I'd get on my bike, go to get to my day job, come back, and then go to the studio till like 1, 2 o'clock at night, writing and finishing. Yeah. So that was the thing. You had to start and finish the track on the same day, and then and no messing around, no coming back to it. So anyway, so I did 2 of those for 2 of the records. So it was, even though it's the first 5 albums up to Little Man, it's also got the 2 bonus albums, so it's 7.
Okay.
So yeah, so I've gone back through my life as it was from 1999 to 2006.
With a view to releasing it.
Yeah, on Kscope. Yeah, so that I'm just delivering it. I've been doing this for about a year because we've been so busy, and then I've been dipping in and out of it, and so Kscope have been patiently waiting. So I'm going to literally deliver it this week.
Exciting.
And then hopefully, it will be announced soon.
Yeah, it's funny that obviously it's become increasingly a trend for artists to re-release material, and some of it is remastered, some of it's properly remixed. And as a fan, I guess, as a bar of music, sometimes I've been quite cynical about that, whether it's some form of repackaging just to generate revenue, but or maybe just a selfish thing for the band because they're kind of hearing something that wasn't quite what they wanted. Yeah. And doing it again. How do you balance those two things out?
It's a difficult balancing act because the record label have got a different agenda. The record label, that they'll say, look, if we can get a new barcode, then it's a new release. The distributors look at it as a new release. Doesn't matter. Yeah. So most people don't look into it and see, well, what exactly have you done? Have you done anything, or is this just a, it's like you say, a cynical excuse just to get it out there again? But I mean, we've probably been quite guilty of reissuing our stuff quite a lot. But the issue for me was that like I said, in the early days, it was very DIY with very
Yeah.
rudimentary
So
stuff.
there's a lot of room for
There was,
improvement.
but you've got to be careful, because you don't want to go in and change the soul of the mix.
Yeah.
You just, so what I'm doing is just trying to make it just sound nicer to listen to,
Well,
as an audio file.
should we talk a bit about Give It Back? Because I was going to come on to
Oh,
that
yeah,
later,
yeah.
but why don't we pick that up now? Because, as I said to you, as a fan, sometimes I have a slight element of cynicism, and I bought Give It Back a month or two ago, whenever it was, and I sat down, and to be honest, I wasn't sure what to expect. But for me, what I found was that it was almost like the music had been given room to breathe.
Yeah.
There was more space, more separation. There was greater clarity. Everything just became more alive.
Right.
So that's how, as a fan, it came across. I don't know whether that's what you were trying to do.
Well,
or...
ultimately, I've always been an audiophile since we were kids. We used to dream of having a Linson deck and things like that when I was at school, and
Yes.
with all my mates. So I've always been a fan of really hi-fi records.
Yeah.
And the good ones, like you say, they have the space. You can hear everything in its place, and that's something that I always aspired to do. I didn't really get there until quite a lot later on in my career. But I realised a lot of it is not really to do with how clever you are at mixing or anything like that. It's how good you are as a band.
Okay.
And if you are really together, really tight, then the mix opens up. So if the bass and the drums are really locked in, and I've got the chemistry together, and everyone is playing it as one, then that's when the magic happens.
Okay.
And I think that's what's happened with the Pineapple Thief, is the band has really come alive since sort of 2016, when we met Gavin. And not just that, but it's difficult as an artist, because it's very difficult to make enough money to dedicate the time
Yes.
to being in a band. So for a long time, we all had to have other jobs, or I had to do a lot of other mixing work. So you couldn't dedicate that time touring, rehearsing. You hear about bands and they said, right, we're going to have 3 weeks of pre-production, and we're all going to go into a big room and have all our crew, and we're going to rehearse for 3 weeks. That's that's such a luxury. Normal bands don't get that. They have to just get together in an evening in a rehearsal room, lug in your amps up the stairs. By the time you set up, if you get an hour or two to play, you're lucky, and then you're lugging it back. And John, our bass player, would drive 2 hours or 3 hours back to Leicester, and so it was really tough, really hard, and we were never prepared enough. But then, when your Wilderness came out, and all of a sudden commercially we got a little bit more successful, we found that, oh my goodness, we can actually do this. We can spend 2 weeks.
What was it? Were you in the right place at the right time? I mean, it's a wonderful album, and I know we're going to talk about it, but what particularly happened that made that change, do you think? I mean, obviously Gavin joined you on drums, but that wouldn't necessarily generate commercial success.
I know. Obviously, Gavin's made a massive difference, but just putting Gavin on a record doesn't mean it's going to sell loads of records.
Exactly.
It's really odd time. I remember vividly, after we did Magnolia, and the drummer we had for Magnolia decided to move on, I said to John, our bass player, I said, I think we should probably, this is it for the band. As we've had a good run.
Really?
Yeah, I remember, and we both agreed. We said, we've had a good run, we've played in Europe, we've done a few shows in the States, so it's more than I ever dreamed of doing. But let's do one more record. And so the pressure was off. Yeah, I just didn't really have any expectations. I just knew it was going to be the last record. Didn't even have a drummer. So I was writing it thinking, what are we going to do? And the K-Scope suggested approaching Gavin, and I thought, well, I'll try. And obviously the rest of that is history. And so the record came out, and it's almost when I stopped. I remember in the early days, you just crave success. Every night you go, oh wow, I'm selling more records. Why can't we get more gigs? Why isn't it happening? And then when I stopped worrying about it, it just happened. I'm not sure if that's the magic answer, but I think for that record, I just wasn't, all I was thinking about was writing the song without thinking about, well, it has to be commercially successful, it has to be this or it has to be that, because I thought that was it.
So Bruce, 14 albums with a Pineapple Thief, as we were saying earlier, and a couple of solo albums. Up until the last couple of albums, What Dissolution and Versions of the Truth, most of the material on your group albums you wrote.
Yeah.
So in a sense, although it's part of a band, you had a lot of artistic freedom in terms of writing that material and could express yourself as you wanted to. Whereas sometimes with other bands, there's a lot of competition between people in the group because they're all kind of writing their own stuff and
Yeah.
what's going to get on the record, what's not going to get on the record, what do they like and what do they don't like. Now, despite having all that artistic freedom, you then decide, I'll go and make a solo album. It's your first self-titled album.
Yeah.
And then All This Will Be Yours, which came out about 6 years later. So
Yeah.
2013, I think, was the first
Right.
album
Yeah.
from memory. So you starting to co-write with Gavin Harrison, which came later from Dissolution. Why the need to go solo? What prompted that?
That's a good question. I mean, so the Pineapple Thief, I guess, was a solo. I mean, literally, I did everything and made up a band because I didn't want people to know it was just me doing everything. So for a long, long time, it was just me. Even in the early days of K-Scope, it was just me, and then the band was purely to play live.
Yeah.
And then I think when we did Magnolia, that was when it started to become more of a band. Dan Osborne, who joined on drums, he took a production role.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden I was being told what to do. Even though I was writing the songs,
Okay.
I was being told, no, it needs to be like this, Bruce, you've got to play, which was fine because I was quite happy with that. I quite liked having someone come in and with some energy. And I think that's probably why I thought, okay, so we've done this album, Magnolia, which was quite, I'd say, probably our heaviest, sort of most mainstream record we've done. I'm very proud of it, but it was a mainstream record. And I thought, I want to go back and do what I used to do in the Pineapple Thief, which is just do everything. And that's very much that singer-songwriter approach.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I did the first solo record.
Okay.
And then after Magnolia, so Magnolia is 2014, and then obviously then we did Your Wilderness.
So Your Wilderness, first studio album with Gavin on drums, I think.
Yeah. So
but he wasn't co-writing with you at that point,
well,
was he?
I didn't get a credit, but in hindsight, I had all the music written because I sent Gavin the demos.
Yeah.
But I think as soon as he heard it, and he tells me now that he straight away had a connection.
Okay.
He was phoning me up and he was telling me, "Hey Bruce, this section here, how about we chop this up here and put this in?" And he's very much likes time signature changes.
Yes.
Not for for time signature change sake, but I had a habit of just going 4 4 4 4 and just going on and on and on and on 6 8 on and on and on.
Okay.
And so he came with the ideas, and I thought, yeah, that really works. It makes it really, really exciting. And I think he was really surprised that I just was like, yeah, let's do it. Yeah. Because he was like, I think he's used to working with artists, like you said, who were very much, how dare you tell me what to do? This is my art, my art man.
Yeah.
And yeah, so straight away we had this relationship that was really open, and I think he was like, well, so Bruce is really open for these ideas. And so for Your Wilderness, it was very much a collaboration, and that was the first time that Steve and John, I think they'll admit it, where they could come in and actually compose their parts. So John would compose his bass lines, whereas before I would demo them up on a bass and say, John,
play that,
man.
Yeah.
And I was so used to it that if he played something different, I'd be like, no, you can't do that. And then all of a sudden, I just chilled out and realised that no, if you've got the right people around you, let them do their thing, and then it just becomes this surprising new thing that you could never.
Because I listened to, on the way down here, had a decent journey. I listened back to back Your Wilderness, and the Bruce Soord, your first album, and All This Is Yours. I listened to them just in a run, and for me, I think a solo album it comes across maybe slightly more stripped back, maybe slightly more acoustic. Although on Your Wilderness there was quite a big acoustic.
There was,
element to it. But it was very difficult listening to them saying, well, that's a Bruce record as opposed to that's a Pineapple Thief record.
Yeah, I think, you might be right. And I think to think if I can take my Pineapple Thief head off and then just say, right, I'm going to do a solo. Because funny enough, I'm just finishing a third solo record now.
Ah, okay.
And so again, it was like, well, how do I separate this from? Because a lot of the time I'd be writing the songs on tour. So we'd be come off stage and then we'd have a day off and I'd be in a hotel and I'd be like, you know, so yeah, it was. I think the new one. I think I've kind of understood how to separate it, and it's very much more. Certainly, the subject matter is very much more me, heart on sleeve thing.
Okay.
In terms of the songs and the style, and again, I was approaching it very much like a singer-songwriter. I'd imagine that I'd be able to go on stage with just my acoustic guitar and do a set based on the solo record.
You said very much about you. I know All This Is Yours was around the birth of, I was going to say third child, but I think it's
strictly the fourth
child, because I know you lost.
We lost our first.
Your first very early on, which must have been a horrible experience.
Yeah. So that was in 2006. So that was in the middle of when I was writing the Little Man record, which is why it's called Little Man actually.
Oh, okay.
So so that was a tough time.
But on the happier note, obviously your newborn, which is a bit of a gap, I think, between your twins.
Yeah. Well, yeah, she was a nice surprise, put it that way. So,
of course, dad's girls, you know.
Yeah. So I had twin boys.
Yeah.
So they were at the time, so they're 15 now, so they were like 11, 12 when she was born. So all of a sudden I was this older, wiser guy.
Yeah.
With a baby. And then all of a sudden, it's your perspective. You know, you're looking at the world through the you know, the eyes of this baby that's come into the world, and just completely changes not changes your perspective, but you look at things maybe in a different way, in a more you focus on things, and that was basically you take that into your songs. So when I pick up a guitar,
yes, you're
thinking, right, what's going through my head right now? What am I going to sing about? And so she really did inspire that one.
The album, a lot of, I think, your other albums, some of the lyrics are quite kind of dark and it's quite kind of despondent.
Yeah.
Your Wilderness is a good probably example of that, but it's slightly more optimistic, I think, that album.
Yeah.
Although, you know, having said that, there's one track on there which is One Day I Shall Leave You.
Oh yeah, I
mean, you've just had a baby born and you're thinking about the sort of that final curtain, as it were.
And you know,
what made you think about that?
When I was writing it, I was thinking, Bruce, can you really do this? You know, because it's so dark. But it's not. Thing is, it's for me. I've always got this cathartic side of things that you think, if you think about those kind of things, it is healthy for you in the moment. If you know that everything is finite, time is finite, and our lives are finite, and that makes you, you know, when you wake up in the morning, you think, you have that malaise.
Yes.
Obviously you just can't just go, I'm going to snap out of it, but it does, to have that perspective. It certainly helps me. Yeah. To think about that all the time. So it's not a morbid, you know, depressing thing to think about that for me. It's ironically, it's a positive thing.
Okay. What? Because it's an acceptance and it's an understanding and it's meant to be, or
for me, it's to understand that every moment that you have on this earth is precious.
Okay.
That's the main thing, and so that when you feel like, certainly for me, when I wake up and think, oh God, you know, and I think, hold on, Bruce, you look at, you've got your room, your studio, that's your day, you've got this beautiful daughter, you know, come on. So that's what I keep having to, you know, I tell myself that I've got absolutely no right to ever have the blues, ever.
It's funny because, as you know, with Make a Difference with Records, we work with a mental health charity, Catalyst, and you know, for me personally, music has always been something which has either helped you through difficult situations or maybe opportunities for quiet reflection.
Yeah.
And as you say, there's sometimes a cathartic element potentially to music. And I think, to be honest, I mean, I don't know whether you'd agree that with your label as prog rock, frankly, but I think a lot of the prog rock music is a form of kind of either escapism getting away from the reality, or a lot of it is kind of quite introspective and quite deep.
Yeah.
And I don't know, is that something you look for in other people's music as well?
I
Or?
prefer the deeper side of music. I mean, as a kid, I enjoyed listening to early, 70s prog rock, as well as all kinds of other stuff. And I know what you mean about the escapism side of prog. And, I still enjoyed that, but I don't think it could move me in the same way that the deeper stuff did.
Yeah. So, and again, when we talk about the tracks you've chosen, maybe we can pick up a couple of examples there. But in terms of your own music and your own writing, I said a lot of it is quite dark, and yet somehow, and I don't really understand it, other than I've experienced it. You're going through this record, and perhaps if you're listening to the lyrics carefully, you'll be thinking, oh wow, kind of that's really quite, dark.
Yeah.
But yet somehow you come out of the other side on the music, and I don't know whether that's a conscious thing you do musically, or whether it's just something that just develops naturally.
I think if I think about it too much, it probably wouldn't work. But I think I could never be universally just bleak.
Yeah.
That's what I don't want to be. I want to talk about these things. Like Your Wilderness is very much, there's a lot of songs about estrangement and, certainly family estrangement, like No Man's Land and The Final Thing on My Mind. I think there's a lyric, every waking day it's you I see coming back to me, those kind of lines.
Yes.
And I think, when the song ends, it doesn't end with this horrible sort of doom, hopelessness. For me, it ends with, hold on, this should reinforce how precious everything is. That's how I hope. But you're right. I mean, the songs are, the subject matter is not, well, it's not happy. Let's all jump around with smiles on our faces. But that doesn't mean that it's bleak and and hopeless. Definitely.
Okay, thank you. So Bruce, not content with Pineapple Thief and doing your own solo stuff, you decided to collaborate with Jonas Renske from Catatonia on Wisdom of Crowds. That seems an interesting combination. How did that come about?
Well, it wasn't my decision actually.
Okay.
Because the funny, we were starting. I was doing some songwriting with the guy that I knew at Kscope actually, a guy called Johnny Wilkes, and he'd written some songs, and he sent them to me, and he said, "Do you want to work on these?" So I sort of produced them. And then we got this sort of a shell of an album together, and we thought, well, who's going to sing it? I didn't want to sing it because it was just, otherwise it would just be, like you said, like a Pineapple Thief. It would just sound like me.
Yeah.
And I said that when I joined the label, I went up and I picked a load of. They came back with a big carrier bag of records that are on their roster, including Peaceville, which is the more of the metal side. And Catatonia just blew me away. Because I've never ever heard a voice like Jonas Rink's voice. Technically it shouldn't work. He's got this beautiful, soft, deep voice on these layers of metal guitars and atmospherics. And we asked him if he fancied doing it, and that was that. I didn't know him, hadn't met him, and he just flew over to my studio, which was in the attic room of my house back in those days.
Okay. And
we just, for 10 days, we just got to know each other and did the record. And we've been friends ever since, which is great.
We're getting on for 10 years since you did that.
10 years. I know, people are always asking.
Is there another?
I hope so. We do talk about it. I mean, Jonas is so busy. He's always busy, and so he's
as
always
are you.
writing. Yeah, yeah. So it's just finding that time. But yeah, I think I hope we'll do one before, the time's up.
Well, we all hope.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful album.
Yeah.
And it sounds amazing on vinyl, by the way.
Oh, great. Yeah.
That was amazing on vinyl. So the last two albums, a bit of a change, gone from solo writing to co-writing largely with Gavin.
Yeah.
How's that gone? I mean, has that been smooth transition or?
Yeah, I think because, like you say, after having done 14 albums, I was always looking to how to, shape things up. And if you find someone you trust, and also I mean, I'll just be frank about it. If you've got one of the best drummers in the world
Yes. Yeah.
that you
definitely.
can work with,
Yeah.
why don't use it? Use it.
Yeah.
And I mean, the process is still very much. I mean, I still write the words, and I still come up with the initial ideas. But what's different now is that I won't finish a song.
Okay.
I'll say, right, I
Have a
know what this
framework.
song. Yeah, I know what this song is going to be
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
So I can't just say let's just cobble a song together and I'll just throw some lyrics over it. I'll always start with a feeling or an experience or something like we discussed before.
Yeah.
And then that's what this song is going to be about. But the jury will still be out on where it's going to go.
Okay.
And musically.
So you've not polished the jam. It's
No.
rough cut and
I think one of the classic examples was the title track off the latest record, Versions of the Truth. I just came up with this initial idea, and I knew what the song was about, and I just had this really sparse doom 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 doom, and that was enough. And I sent it to Gavin and said, "What do you think of this as an idea?" He said, "Oh yeah," and he said, "Oh, I really like that." And it said, like, "I'll work on that a bit." And what he normally does is drums and chops it up and sends things back.
Yeah.
But that time he got his marimba out and started playing the marimba. And he said, "Bruce, what do you think of this?" And I played it. I was like, "What the hell? It's like it's got a marimba on it." And I thought, "Great."
Yeah.
Why the hell not? This is great. And then the song just developed like that between the two of us. And then quite early on, we'd bring John and Steve in as well to.
Okay.
Once we've got that kind of, certainly there has to be a sort of a core track together, especially with Gavin with his playing, and then John would come in and put his bass down, so and then there'd be some interaction with that as well.
So in terms of the writing process, you're not in the studio together jamming, you're kind of passing things backwards and forwards and
so
gradually developing them?
We have spoken about that because it's a relatively gradual process, although with technology nowadays it's so quick.
Yes.
I could be on the phone and an hour later he sent me a drum, because Gavin's got his kit permanently set up, so you can just jump on the drums and play, and you've got a pretty decent sounding drum mix off straight away. And then he sent it to me, but people always ask, well, is that a bit, in the songwriting, is that a bit sterile? You're not in the same room, and I think there's pros and cons. If I was in the same room as Gavin, there would be a lot more pressure. So he would say, "Okay, Bruce, how I'm going to do it," and I'd be going, "Oh," it's quite nice to listen to it and then sit down and think, "Yeah, I'm gonna," rather than have Gavin looking at me going, "Come on, Bruce,
time's money."
So that's quite nice, but at the same time, you do lose that, like me and you talking maybe. Now. Yeah. If this was a Zoom interview, it would be completely different.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely.
And so what we're going to do for the new record is I'm going to spend some time at Gavin's place, and we're going to do some traditional jamming. I mean, but Gavin always says, "Yeah, I've tried that so many times, and we just end up just jamming in E for like half an hour and actually never actually coming up with a song." But he has had success doing it. And,
so
and
a 40-minute prog track in E, basically.
Exactly.
with a crescendo here and there.
Noodling up and down. And So I think what we're gonna do is I'm gonna go with some bare bones ideas.
Okay.
Turn up basically with a bag of riffs.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna get together and say, "What do you think of this?" And then go, and that's how I'm hoping it will turn out.
What's your writing process like? Is it very much you sit down with the guitar and it's a feeling, or do you get a particular inspiration from an experience, but it's guitar first and then the lyrics come later? Or?
Usually it's guitar and a concept for the song. So there's normally some key lines.
Okay.
So the meaning of the song is already there.
Okay.
In my head, but actually getting the words it does take a long time. But there would always be the core word, the core part of it lyrically, and then it would usually be guitar, and then you would just try and just clear your mind and just see what happens. Normally when I do it, if I'm too regimented and think, right, I'm going to write a song now, and I know I'm going to try doing it with a synth or something, it doesn't usually work. Yeah. It normally just when it happens, it happens.
It's funny, as we were talking through the progression and then collaborating with other musicians and going to co-writing, it's got all the hallmarks of someone who's kind of grown in confidence, really, and become more relaxed about things? Because I know you talked in previous interviews about, you know, when you were younger, you sort of not very confident, stage fright was an issue, and
Oh yeah.
and then you've talked about how the fact you relish going on stage and the touring
I do.
bits, you know,
Yeah.
just gives you a real kind of buzz.
Yeah.
Has that just happened over years, or?
It has happened over years actually, and it's just a certain things like even when meeting Gavin, and Gavin has worked with a hell of a lot of people and gets sent an awful lot of stuff for him to
Porcupine
work
Tree,
on.
of course, he's particularly
Absolutely,
known for.
yeah. So for when he says to me, you know, when I heard your songs, you know, straight away I knew that it was really exciting. I was like, oh, maybe I am okay at writing songs. You know, that's gradually. I mean, you've got to be careful. You don't want to turn into, you don't want to take yourself too seriously.
Yeah.
But there came a point where I just realised, hold on, I'm not out to prove myself to anyone. Although obviously it's you want to share your music. You want people to share what you're doing and appreciate as much as I do.
Yeah.
And then that leads on to an element of commercial success, which allows me to carry on doing it.
Yeah.
But really, I all of a sudden I just felt like, hold on, I'm going to do this, and if you like it, great. If you don't like it, it's not going to bother me.
Yeah.
It did take a while to get there.
Yeah.
And that's why I can just walk on stage now and just go, yeah, this is me, this is what I do. Hope you like it, and luckily, generally, people do.
And what do you think is the biggest evolution in terms of the sound that over the years? Because you can pick up almost any Pineapple Thief album and immediately you know it's a Pineapple Thief album. So there's a certain core and a certain consistency that runs through it. What do you see as the biggest evolution?
I think the biggest evolution for me is that now it's a core band. Whereas in the early days, it would be there would be quite sort of lush arrangements. I wouldn't be actually thinking from a band perspective, or even I wouldn't be thinking there's 5 of us going on stage. We're gonna give them play as a band, as a 5 of us. Traditional sort of 70s approach. So a lot of the albums would have big string sections and layers and layers of things, because I didn't really think about it as a band. I just thought about it as music.
Okay.
And I think what's happened, especially since we started touring properly since 2000, I mean, we used to do sort of 2-week tours and then have to go back to the day job. But whereas now, we do proper 6-week stints, This year we've done about, 12.
We did Europe and then the US, didn't
USA,
you?
so that's 12 weeks.
Which was it a first for you, the USA, or did you done a bit before
We've done
COVID?
USA just before COVID,
You just got in there, because I know you were out there, was it 19? I know you were planning on
Yes,
being out.
we came back
lockdown.
December 19, so we were just in time. And I think that's now the evolution of the band, is that it really is a band. There's the 5 of us walk on stage doing what we do, and that's what I want to bring into the record. It's the 5 of us that are creating something that ultimately then the album represents that.
So next steps, your new album of your own.
Yeah, which I've been working on for a long time. So yeah, that I'll be delivering that hopefully in about 4 or 5 weeks.
Remixing back catalogue.
The box set, so volume 1 of the box set, that should be announced soon.
And then a new Pineapple Thief album.
New Pineapple Thief, yeah, we've actually written quite a lot of stuff. But as I said, me and Gavin are going to spend some time together when he finishes with Porcupine Tree. So he's touring with Porcupine Tree now. Yeah. So we're going to go and see their last show actually in London.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, and then it'd be so nice to actually be a punter. Yeah. I can actually go and just sit back and enjoy watching Gavin from the.
So you can just watch something like that without going, oh, that's a good idea, or that's
it's difficult. It is difficult. I think I will switch off, and I'm just gonna just enjoy it without.
Well, I wouldn't have done that.
I'm not going to dissect it. No dissecting. No.
So Bruce, before we get on to the 7 questions that we ask every artist on That's My Vinyl Answer, I guess my first question for you is vinyl, CD, streaming. For you as a listener and for you as an artist?
I've vinyl Definitely. I mean, I did grow up with all my mates. We used to just hunt down vinyl, go to all the second-hand records. We'd have days out to London, Liverpool.
Okay.
Liverpool had so many second-hand record shops that we would just go back and, you know, these £1 sort of bargain bins, because there'd be so many obscure sort of 70s people that I was really into that you go, oh wow.
Apparently it's called crating.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
it's got a name.
It was a new name. I hadn't heard of it.
Yeah, so we were all craters.
All craters in these shops that were piled high.
And we walk out over things. Yeah, walk out with carrier bags full of vinyl, which I've still got.
But I gather they're in your attic.
I know.
Probably not the best place.
No, I need a bigger. I need the next record to sell a million and move into a mansion with a proper listening room.
So do you still have a turntable?
I do. Yes. Yeah.
Working?
It is. Yeah. So we've got a small. I've got a small record collection in the lounge.
Okay.
But the piles I've got about 600 or 700 in the attic, which I will get down.
But when you're mixing, obviously you're mixing it for different media. I mean,
you are, but I think nowadays it's everything. The loudness wars are over, so that's a nice thing. So you don't have to worry about. So nowadays the loudness for vinyl and streaming and CD is about the same.
Okay.
So it's kind of settled down. It's a sensible environment. I mean, that's why we're talking about a lot of people reissuing and remastering. Is because the days of the loudness wars just destroyed so many good records.
Yeah.
So from a mixing perspective, I don't really think about the form. Mastering, obviously, mastering for vinyl is slightly different, but not too bad.
It's funny, you know, people sometimes ask me, they'll say, well, what is it about vinyl? I mean, it's got, you know, background static, it's scratchy, it's inconvenient. And I always say to them, well, for me, vinyl is an experience.
Yeah.
You pick something up, you got the artwork.
Yes.
Pull the record out, you put it on, and you kind of listen uninterrupted to something that was certainly, for a lot of records, recorded as an entity.
Yeah, they were
designed. A series of individual.
Yeah, they were designed
tracks.
to be listened as an album. And as a kid, I just remember going to sleep and then waking up because it's going over the run out groove, and you just you know, that's just those days. You know, you don't get that experience of streaming for certainly not.
Yeah, and as I said, I mean, I think like a lot of people, I've then gravitated towards having a mixture of the three.
Yeah.
Streaming for convenience and the vinyl when you want to sit down and really kind of get into the music. But so we're talking about albums. The first question we ask people is, what's the first album you ever bought?
Well, yeah, this was an obscure, nothing to do with my music taste really. It was a Status Quo live.
Nothing to do with my music taste. That was a bit of a
well.
caveat.
I mean, I kind of grew up. I wouldn't say I'm a Status Quo fan now, or that I'm influenced by the Status Quo.
Yeah, I can't hear much of their kind of chord changes in your music.
Not that I'm, you know, I'm not dissing Status Quo at all. But I must have been 8 or 9 years old. I remember I bought it from Woolworths, and when my parents went out, they had this one of these old school sort of 80s sort of stereo things where, you know,
the ones with the automatic.
Yeah, and it was like a radio built in, everything
and
built in, and a cassette.
Singles up on in the middle.
Yeah, I can't might have
and these to keep dropping down.
Yeah, and so I would put that on when they went out at full blast and just headbang in the. I thought it was the heaviest thing I'd ever heard.
And you still have it?
I do. Yep.
When did you last play it? Then?
Oh, probably when I was 9.
What about first single then?
That was Eye of the Tiger, so that was similar time. And I just remember when that Rocky film came out, Eye of the Tiger was #1. It was being played absolutely everywhere.
Yeah, yeah.
And just that riff. I mean, that riff is you still hear it today. You know,
I have a horrendous, very embarrassing experience actually related to Eye of the Tiger. I once went out to Singapore for a business meeting with a firm we were working with. And they said, well, would you come out and say a few words before we sit down to have dinner? What they hadn't told me was that as I was coming on to say a few words, they decided to play Eye of the Tiger. So there's me walking on stage in this suit, and they go, bam, 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 and I'm going, what the hell?
So how are you going to follow that?
So I can't think of that record without cringing
at that moment
every
of your
time
life.
I hear it.
Yeah.
But it's funny, this thing about music, isn't it? You kind of remember where you were. So you remember it kind of in Woolworths.
Yeah.
In the days when Woolworths existed and sold records.
Yeah.
And In fact, loads of shops sold records.
They did.
You know,
Yes,
the local
Smiths
chemist would have a
and-
section.
Yeah, they
with,
did actually, didn't they? Yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah.
But it brings back experiences, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So obviously, if we move away from kind of your first stuff, and I'm not going to tell you what my first record was because that's very embarrassing too. But this is a difficult one, I know. But what's your favourite album? What's the one you would keep going back to, keep gravitating
Well, I think
towards?
because I've been asked this a few times, and I think it would. It is difficult.
Because you kind of indicated you two maybe with this, so you kind of cheating
The
slightly. But
70s,
I'll let you
I'm
off.
cheating.
You can have two.
I mean, when I was growing up, it was Crime of the Century by Supertramp, and I think a lot of it is to do with how old you were, where you were, and how it. But I still listen to that record now and just love it. It's just absolutely timeless.
Just to bring back a few memories, I happen to.
Yeah.
I don't know whether have you got this in your attic?
I have, and I found it's a special audiophile pressing with heavy, which is I know nowadays everything's like
180 gram vinyl.
But this was like in the 90s. I found a 180 gram.
I mean, a hell of an album, isn't it? I mean, School Bloody Well Right,
Brilliant,
and
it's really considering what is it, 1973?
Three, I think. No, it's
1974. It sounds amazing.
It does.
It's a really, really hi-fi recording, and I think, funny enough, we had, because I was a fanboy, we had John Halliwell play clarinet on Your Wilderness.
You've anticipated one of my questions.
Right.
I'm going to ask you how. Tell me then, how did that happen?
Well, because I just thought, right, so like I said, Your Wilderness, I thought, right, this is the last Pineapple Thief record, and I thought, okay, let's just fulfill some
childhood dreams, yeah.
And let's send John Halliwell in me. I think I thought of that because of, when Gavin replied, just send him an email. And I thought, oh, actually, these people will play.
Yeah.
And John Halliwell got back in very, very similar fashion, and we drove up to Manchester and met him. He turned up in his Rolls Royce.
Oh, really?
Yeah, had a pizza, and he told us loads of stories about, especially the early days. And he told us about how the band basically were they hired a cottage not too far from here. I think it's a farm or something, and just rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed. In those days, if you had a big record deal, you were paid a wage, not very much.
Yeah.
So they weren't living the life of Riley, but they were all together rehearsing and for Crime of the Century. And at that point, they hadn't broken through at all. They were at the point where if this record doesn't work, we're going to be dropped, and that's it. Our dreams are over. So to hear the stories and how much time they spent working on like the tom sounds, things like that. And then when you listen to Crime of the Century and you listen to those toms, you think, well, they sound good because there's a reason they sound good, because they really wanted them. They really worked to make it the record sound good.
Yeah.
So it's just really interesting to listen to how they did it when they were effectively unknown and not particularly wealthy.
So it brings back kind of feelings, happy days, growing up, youth, and everything that brings with that.
Yeah.
It's funny. I was once lucky enough to meet Steve Hackett, and we were talking about music, and I must have been feeling brave because at one point we were talking about musical loves and what you grew up with, and he was always talking about the Beatles at one point. And I said to him, "This is going to sound, absolutely heinous thing to say, but I think the Beatles are a brilliant band, absolutely brilliant band. I think the music is amazing, but it doesn't move me. It doesn't move me emotionally." And he kind of looked at me and didn't bat an eyelid. I thought he was going to react. He didn't bat an eyelid. And he said, well, look, it's all about sort of puberty and adolescence and growing up. And he said the stuff that you were kind of listening to when you were realising all these emotions and feelings and realising there was a bigger world out there, that stuff kind of stays with you.
Yes.
And it influences you and it never leaves you kind of thing. And I don't know, is Supertramp, was it that time?
Absolutely. So that was when I was sort of 14 years old, and I went from not really having any music tastes to going to a friend of mine's house who had a big record collection, and he played, it was actually an Alan Parsons record called Tales of Mystery and Imagination.
Oh, yes.
But I just sat there and I opened the record and I was like, whoa, what is this? And it had a hypnosis sort of design and a booklet. Gatefold with a booklet.
Has to be gatefold. And booklet's a bonus. Yeah.
And I was just, what is this world?
Yeah.
And that was it, the rabbit hole I went in. And so that sort of really defined my time. And then I realised actually, you know, I was at school. This was during the 80s, so it was New Romantic era and the sort of the birth of manufactured pop. So Stockhaven Walk where they was just coming together. And I was just listening to 70s prog, so I was definitely a bit of a weirdo at school. And I think but it kind of gave me a sense of purpose. You know how you are when you're, whatever movement you become, you feel gives you
want to
purpose.
belong to something, don't you?
And that's what I felt.
Because it didn't come from your parents, the prog stuff, did it? Because they weren't that musical, as I understand it.
No, not musical at all.
That's something you discovered for yourself.
I did, yeah.
That's true. Me, actually, my parents weren't really musical. I discovered that just at the time.
Yeah. So
someone put on A Trick of the Tail or whatever it was, and I thought, wow, what's this?
Something and that lights up in your head.
That was it. That was it. So the second album you've chosen is quite different.
Very different.
2000s.
So 2002, I think. But so Beck's Sea Change. I've always quoted this record. It is painfully melancholic.
Well, he wrote it after a breakup, didn't he, with his fiancée?
But again, I just find it. I don't listen to it and feel like, oh, this is so bleak. I just think it's melancholy. And if you're in the mood for melancholy, then that's a record. But it's just beautifully recorded. The way that he plays his acoustic guitar and sings, he has a really sort of low, naturally easy tone to his voice. Because when a lot of people think about Beck, they just think of I'm a Loser Baby and all that kind of stuff, and his sort of white kind of hip hop style. But for me, it's his melancholic sort of folk inspired songwriting that I loved. And the thing about that record is it just sounds incredible. Not for any sort of clever or gimmicky reason. It's just, I think when it was recorded, it was just bare bones, But the band is amazing. The sound, the string arrangements, were done by Beck's father, but I've never heard anything like it. In fact, I did try and contact him and say, "Well, you want to do string arrangements for me?" I didn't get a reply.
Right. Okay. We might know you've chosen his record.
Well, yeah, maybe you should. But yeah, it's just, and I found myself just whenever I was thinking, oh, well, I don't know what to listen to, I would just always go back to it and just.
Okay, cool. Do you want to mention the production?
Well, yeah. Oh, and yes, obviously the production. So Nigel Godrich, probably most well known for Radiohead, but he's just done loads of stuff. If you look at his discography, and recently worked on the latest solo album of Roger Waters. So
okay.
And I think he did a lot of his surround stuff as well. So, but yeah, I'd love to. He's a guy I'd like to meet. I'd love to meet him one day. But yeah, he's
so just, if you're watching,
yeah, yeah. But no, he's an absolute genius.
Yeah,
he really is.
Yeah. Okay. So, talking of sort of musical influences, couple of kind of related questions. First of all, you can choose someone dead or alive. Which artist would you most like to collaborate with, and why?
I probably have to go back to Beck again.
Okay.
Because I think certainly in my field that I am sort of known in the progressive rock world, but there's an awful lot of people that collaborate in it seems to be more than anyone else in any other genre. So I'm always thinking, when people say, who do you like to collaborate with? I'm always trying to think from sort of maybe a slightly left field angle. But the thing about Beck is just he's got so many ideas. You can just tell he's got so many great ideas.
Yeah.
And from a completely different angle and different perspective.
So that could really take you out of your comfort zone, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'd probably be quite intimidated as well, which would be a good thing.
Yeah.
Keep me on my toes.
Well, let's watch this space.
Yeah.
see what happens. Live band, who would you most like to see?
I think it would have been Pink Floyd with the classic 70s lineup.
Which I presume you never saw unless you saw the Live 8.
No, I only saw Live 8 on the telly, and that didn't feel quite the same as, we're talking 75.
Yeah.
70s.
At their peak.
Yeah.
Whereas that was 2005, I think.
Yeah,
the Live 8 thing.
and took a bit of getting them back together, didn't it? Between
Maybe not the
David
same
and-
chemistry as there was.
no. But it's just want to not just that. It was just I've got this idea of what it was like to be a music lover in the 70s. I know the 70s was a dark time, but for
Yeah.
me, I just see it as like a golden age of music.
Yeah.
But I guess it's easy to forget like the 3-day week and the riots and the strikes and all that kind of
Power
stuff.
cuts.
Yeah. But all I think about
Could
is
be
like,
back there again.
yeah, actually true. Maybe it's going to be another golden era for
Another golden era for
me.
prog. Prog's going to make an even bigger
Yeah.
move now.
Yeah.
Excellent. So, Bruce, as you know, with Make a Difference with Records, we work with Catalyst, the mental health charity, and the musical connection has really made us think kind of about the music and mental health angle quite a lot. And one of the things we thought would be really great is if we could create, we called it a virtual vinyl vault. So basically it's kind of like a library of albums that, you know, musicians think might help people who might, for example, be in a bad space or maybe just need a bit of escapism. And particularly in a zone where, you know, mental health's a much more kind of open topic and people are perhaps more receptive to it. You know, music's one of the tools that people sometimes have to help them when they're on kind of some kind of journey, whatever it might be, whether it's just a small bump in the road or something more major. So, as I said, we're asking artists to nominate 3 albums that they think might be relevant in that space to put in our virtual vinyl vault.
Right.
So, what did you think of?
Well, I think that I've gone on about this record for practically the whole interview, but I would say Sea Change.
Yeah.
Because it would just, well, it certainly helped me. And like I said before, it's incredibly melancholic, but it doesn't make me feel down.
Okay.
You know, I get lost listening to that record. And the other one I would pick is quite an obscure one, actually, got by a guy called Anthony Phillips. You probably know from
Ex-Genesis guitarist, of course.
Yeah. And then went on to have a huge catalogue as a solo artist.
I'll let you say what the album is, but you've actually managed to pick, I think, the one album that somehow I don't have of his.
Ah, really? It's really obscure.
It passed me by.
Yeah.
So tell us.
Well, I think this is another one where it was the time and the place of my life where
Yeah.
I got this record, and it was the one record that I would always play late at night when I was ready to go to sleep. Not that it would make me go to sleep, but it would just take me, it's instrumental, and it would just take me off into this place. And so the record is it's called Slow Dance.
Yeah.
But it's very, I think it was released in late 80s.
In fact, 1990.
Oh, was it 1990?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, 1990 it was released. Instrumental.
Yeah, completely instrumental, and lots of synths. So Anthony Phillips is most known for his acoustic guitar, 12-string guitars, and things like that. But this one was all synths. There's a little bit of guitar, lots of drum machines, and big sort of orchestral sounds. So off the face of it, you think, well, I'm not sure if I like that. But I just listened to it again recently, and it's beautiful.
How did you stumble across it then? What?
Do you know what? That was in the old, what do you call it, crate? The crate, yeah. Although this was in a local shop in Yeovil called Our Price. You remember the Our Price one?
I do remember Our Price, yeah.
And I was flicking through and I saw The Geese and the Ghost, which was his biggest release.
I love that album.
And I looked at the cover and I thought, oh, and I looked at the back and I saw all these musicians and then just all these playing all kinds of different instruments. I thought, oh, this has got to be interesting. So I just bought it on a whim and loved it. And you know, Geese and the Ghost is definitely my top 10. Of all time.
Yes, it's got the God If I Saw Her Now is of course a very young Phil
Collins, and some brilliant drumming on there as well by Phil Collins.
It's really about someone who's never forgotten his first love, isn't it?
Yeah.
That song, it's really quite
it's quite
poignant. Walked in the room now, I just go to pieces.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah. So Bruce, album number 3, what have you chosen?
So number 3 is remember I was telling you about that moment where I all of a sudden became a music lover, and that was the moment when I heard this record, and it's Tales of Mystery and Imagination by the Alan Parsons Project, which is when you talk about escapism. This is a classic concept album based on Edgar Allan Poe.
Horror stories.
Lots of horror stories, but it was just one of those records where the first time I heard it, I thought, what's going on? There's different vocalists on every song, and what I ended up doing was like following these, like the John Miles, Colin Blunstone, all these amazing people. Yeah. And then I just got into all their discographies. And but it's got string arrangements. I says, well, it's a rock album, but it's got all of a sudden it's got this orchestra coming in. How is that possible? It's just amazing, and it just blew my mind. And yeah, it's just one of those places, right place, right time when I heard that record.
Yeah, I think we were talking about this a bit earlier. I think a lot of those experiences, particularly with the vinyl, when vinyl was at its pomp, sort of pre-CD,
Yeah.
you literally had that experience of picking up the album,
Yes.
opening it up, and then putting it on, and it was almost like a performance.
Yeah.
That's probably a little too formal. The way
Yeah,
that's come
and you're
out,
sat there with it on your lap as you're listening to
and
it.
you're listening to it,
Yeah.
and it's kind of washing over you,
Yeah.
as opposed to being in the background while you're emptying the
Yeah,
dishwasher
true.
or whatever else.
It's got your entire attention, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you remember where you were?
Yeah, I was at my friend. As you know, when I told you I was before Pineapple Thief, I was in a band called Vogue Unicorn.
Yes.
But that was the brainchild of my best mate at school, a guy called Neil Randall. And,
Okay.
So I was at his house, and his dad had the most amazing record collection and hi-fi. So he had a Lynn Sondek with a fancy arm, and I watched the arm go down so slowly, and then when it hit the vinyl, it went. I was like, whoa, what is this? And then when it starts, when the record starts, I was like, just blew my mind.
Yeah.
Just sat in front, purposely sat like a chair like this in front of this hi-fi system, proper hi-fi system.
Yeah.
I'd never seen anything like it, or heard anything like it. Both.
And influenced you, I guess, ultimately in music and.
Oh, I was just doing this box set now, and I was going, God, you can hear the Alan Parsons. Especially, I've got a tendency to do big harmonies, big R's with lots of. That's what Alan
Layering.
Parsons is. I used to do that all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, oh right, yeah. So that's where it's definitely in me.
Good.
Mm.
Well, I think speaking for all Pineapple Thief fans, I think we're very pleased that you did that and went on that journey. So we come on now to the kind of crunch question, which is kind of what's your vinyl answer, where we say to an artist, okay, thinking about your own career and your own catalogue, either because it means something to you personally, or you think in the context of the mental health charity we work with, what one album would you want to donate to make a difference with records, and why?
I think for a lot of reasons, it would be Your Wilderness. One, from a personal point of view, from where I was when we made Your Wilderness.
Yeah.
My music career was I'd effectively given up, so it was over, and I'd had a long conversation with my best friend and bass player John, and we all agreed, and so we set out to make this record knowing it was the end.
Yes.
So for it to actually not be the end, in hindsight, but actually it was a new beginning.
And very successful too.
Yeah, well, yes, and yeah, and so it's very poignant even talking about it now, because it's like what that has meant for me as a person and my life, and not just me, my family and everyone around me.
Yeah,
has been incredible. And then.
So when did you know? What point during the making of the record or afterwards? What point did you know, actually, no, that's not the end. This is going to be a new beginning, effectively.
Well, I think it was obviously we had Gavin drumming on it, and then when we saw that, oh, hold on, there's loads of. We just released it very, very quietly, and you could see people going, "Hey, what's this?" And all of a sudden, there'll be loads of people talking about it. And then we realised, well, there's something happening. We've got to go out and tour. We got to get the band together. It's like, let's get the band back together. And but we obviously had to convince Gavin. He didn't know us really, and so we had to and it took a bit of convincing. And eventually, we all got out on the road together. And that, I think that was when we realised we were back on. The band was back together, and the music career was still alive. So yeah, it was a very big moment.
The album itself is kind of I'd call it a broad church. It shows a lot of the different characteristics of the music that you write. So you've got some kind of relatively heavy bits, but you've got quite a lot of acoustic sections, and you've got, of course, Prog Lovers. You've got a 9-minute 30 track on there as well, which of course it's got to be 9-minute 30 if it's a prog album, doesn't it? But in terms of the lyrics, and I was kind of having a refresh and looking at the album yesterday in preparation for today. Is this a story about one person or several people? Because there's this theme throughout all the tracks about this kind of loss and separation and relationships that
Yeah, I think it's an amalgamation of all my experience. You know, a lot of my wife and I have been through a lot. You know, and our marriage hasn't always been plain sailing. Luckily, it is now.
Yeah.
But you know, there has been times where we've effectively been estranged, even
Yes.
though we were never divorced.
Yeah.
But you know, so that was very raw, and so you would sing. I would sing about that kind of thing, and so there's songs like That Shore and Tear You Up, which are all about that kind of thing, that estrangement and in exile. You know, I'm in exile. You know, and so that was a common theme. But then there was also the I would be influenced, like where the track Where We Stood, the very last track, was actually about my father and memories and memories of looking up to him when we used to go to Eastbourne where my grandma lived, and I just have these memories of what it was like for him when I was a very, very young child. And that's why we call this, you know, that's why it's called Where We Stood.
That makes perfect sense to me now you've said that. I was admitting to you earlier that song has actually made me cry. Because the guitar, the achingly beautiful guitar, and then the imagery of the hand holding.
Yes.
It's just very, very powerful.
Yeah.
And so I hadn't realised it was about the son-father.
Yeah, and because my relationship with my father is like, obviously it's a loving one, but he's comes from an era where it's very distant. You know, it's quite a strict upbringing, but quite distant. And as he's grown into his sort of old age and final years now, he's become much more in touch with his. You know, he kind of almost regrets the fact that he wasn't. You know, now it's very natural for families to be very close, but that wasn't the case with when we were.
I think it was an era, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, sort of 60s, 70s, it was kind of probably like that if you were growing up as a
strict
young child.
Yeah.
You didn't talk about emotions. You didn't talk about. You kind of just dealt with it and moved on.
No, I mean that's the thing. The things that luckily I've got a great relationship with my two boys, and the things we talk about. I stopped to think, my goodness, this wasn't even on the radar in my childhood. So it's
of course it depended with me on what the subject was. I'd be going, yes sir, that's my wife.
Yeah.
Okay, they've got a question for you. Can you come and have a chat?
Yeah.
Some stuff I was fine with, but there was some stuff. No, that was definitely one for my wife on that side.
Yeah.
Does your wife into your music then, or is it?
She is.
Is it a separate thing?
No, and actually she quite. She'd be the first person I play new songs to.
Oh, that's great.
So it's a good relationship, and there's a lot of songs that have been influenced by my wife. Quite a few after we've had a blazing row, and I pick up my guitar and go,
yeah.
But you know, a lot. I mean, I wouldn't say that I've ever just written a love song, but there are lots of love songs in there that you maybe wouldn't know.
As I said, I mean, I think it's an amazing album. I think although there's a common theme that's definitely kind of mood changes and shifts in it, which just keep it interesting the whole way through. But as I said, I wasn't sure whether it was literally one person, or you've said it was kind of bits of yourself.
Yeah.
So in a sense, there's that common theme.
Yes.
But it's people in different contexts, I guess. Is what you're saying. Did it start as effectively a concept album then?
I think I just found myself having a really peak sort of period of creativity. So the songs came out very quickly.
Okay.
With that theme, I
Okay.
guess. So you had all the tracks like No Man's Land and Final Thing on My Mind, That Shore, Tear You Up, but they all had that same core feeling.
Yeah, it definitely flows.
Yeah.
It definitely flows, so there is that consistency through it. I love it. The artwork is really interesting.
Yeah, so this is Carl Glover.
It's very US.
Yeah, so Carl Glover, again, because this record came together almost by accident. We found ourselves with a finished record, but we didn't have the cover.
Yeah.
And K-Scope suggested getting in touch with Carl Glover, who's very prolific, and he sent us. He had this collection of Americana photos that he basically just picks up at car boot sales. So they were all completely free to use. So he would send them to us, and I think he did some jiggery pokery with them. But the front cover, when we saw it, when he suggested this as a cover, and it was the mother holding a child's hand overlooking the wilderness, and then the name came from the actual cover.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
Go that way around. Okay.
It was just perfect. It's
What
one of those moments.
Was it going to be Exxon until that point?
Yeah,
or?
I don't know actually. It's one of those horrible things like, what are you going to call a record? It says, I don't know. And so it just came together really, really quick.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Bruce, thank you so much for spending so much time with us today.
That's all right.
It's been wonderful to catch up.
Mm.
You're clearly hugely busy still, and we look forward to the solo album and the Pineapple Thief new album as and when that surfaces, and of course the remixes.
Yes, great.
When they come out.
Yeah.
So start saving those pennies.
Yes. yeah, lots to do.
Bruce, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I've really enjoyed it.
I've enjoyed it too.
Thanks.
Take care.
So Bruce and I were just talking about how swimmingly everything had gone, and then we both looked at each other and realised we didn't do the favourite album cover bit. So here we are, bit spontaneous.
Yes.
Bruce, talk us through your favourite album cover.
I've gone for a bit of an obvious one, although I think the greatest album of all time by votes was Dark Side of the Moon, I think. But the only reason I love this is because, one, it's really surreal.
Yeah.
Two, it's hypnosis. And it's just one of those things when I picked it up and looked at it, I was like, what is that? You know, and this is in the days where you couldn't just make someone look like they're on fire. You know, they actually had to make this guy, I think he singed his hair, or something.
Oh, wow.
But anyway, they had to do it. And it's just one of those amazing things. In the days where record business was such a huge thing that actually the budget for the artwork and the cover must have been more than the budget for our records put together.
So Wish You Were Here is your choice. Of course, it's got mega tracks, Shine and Crazy Diamond, which takes up most of the album.
Yeah.
Amazing piece of music.
Yes.
And of course, later on, didn't Storm work on one of your albums?
Yeah, that was an incredible moment. So he worked on Someone Who's Missing, which is me covered in Post-it notes. And actually, he said to me, I'm really lucky because he doesn't normally allow the artist to feature. What you'll notice about Storm Thorson is that the band never feature, or hardly ever feature. But I was the Post-it note man, but nobody knows.
That's My Final Answer with Bruce Soord of the Pineapple Thief was brought to you by Make a Difference with Records in partnership with the Surrey mental health charity Catalyst. Look out for further episodes.